Bernard Madoff, genius of huge Wall Street Ponzi plot, kicks the bucket at 82. Bernard L. Madoff, who passed on April 14 at 82, was the genius of maybe the biggest Ponzi conspire ever, a berated image of Wall Street voracity and, once, quite possibly the most sought-after stockbrokers in high account. For quite a long time, Bernie Madoff was viewed as a speculation sage. He had customers, homes and boats thrown about elite areas all throughout the planet. Utilizing the clout he had amassed as a genuine dealer, he attracted, and ultimately fleeced, a great many financial backers who endowed to him their retirement investment funds, their youngsters' school reserves and their monetary security. His customers included Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel, movie producer Steven Spielberg, entertainers Kevin Bacon and Kyra Sedgwick, U.S. Senator Forthright R. Lautenberg, DNJ, and scores of retired folks and other private people. Banks, mutual funds, colleges and noble cause came to depend on his unrealistically solid announced returns. Truly, there were no such returns. For at any rate 16 years, and maybe more, Mr. Madoff ran a trick wherein he paid existing financial backers with cash from new customers. Ponzi plot Lord Bernie Madoff, who bilked financial backers out of billions, looks for clinical delivery from jail. In 2008, as a monetary emergency injured the U.S. economy, financial backers started looking for withdrawals of assets that Mr. Madoff didn't have. His demise reviewed the ruins sensationalized in Greek misfortunes. It was quick, horrendous and, everything considered, inescapable. On December 10, 2008, Mr. Madoff educated his children, Mark and Andrew Madoff, that his business, the family's lavish abundance and his financial backers' thriving portfolios were all only one major falsehood. The siblings handed their dad over to specialists. His capture the following day at his New York penthouse shocked a large number of the most experienced monetary specialists. Government controllers, as well, appeared to be gotten unprepared, a discernment that filled public shock as appraisals of casualty misfortunes came to $20 billion in real unique ventures and $65 billion in recorded paper riches. His openness set off years-long endeavors by authorities, eminently Irving H. Picard, the court-selected trustee for the liquidation of Mr. Madoff's protections firm, to unwind his plan and repay casualties. Numerous financial backers would recover just a negligible portion of the cash they had given him. For Mr. Madoff, the individual aftermath was disastrous. His family generally crumbled. He was so generally scorned for his apparent hubris that, revealing for at any rate one court appearance, he wore a tactical armor carrier. "I live in a tortured state currently knowing about all the torment and enduring that I have made," he said in June 2009, when he was condemned to 150 years in jail subsequent to confessing to 11 crime accusations, including protections misrepresentation and illegal tax avoidance. "I have left a tradition of disgrace." Mr. Madoff allegedly had a respiratory failure in jail in 2013. In February 2020, he asked an appointed authority for sympathetic delivery, referring to end-stage renal illness and different sicknesses that had left him needing a wheelchair and steady consideration. The solicitation was denied. His demise, at a government jail clinical office in Butner, NC, was declared by a Bureau of Prisons representative. The representative, Christy Brashears, didn't give a reason however said Mr. Madoff had tried negative for the COVID. At the hour of his demise, Mr. Madoff stayed a central lowlife in the account of the 2008 financial emergency that, incidentally, had revealed his bad behavior. His plan didn't highlight subprime advances, credit default trades or the other complex monetary moves that had added to the beginning of the downturn. Mr. Madoff had occupied with the basic, antiquated demonstration of cheating. Formation of a fantasy. To numerous customers, Mr. Madoff appeared to be irreproachable, a business person whose coarseness and creativity had powered his ascent from relative clothes to outrageous wealth. In his initial working years, he was a lifeguard and introduced sprinkler frameworks, saving his income to begin a private speculation firm. He was in his mid-20s when he opened Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities in 1960. Mr. Madoff was credited with comprehension before numerous others the expected job of the PC and stock exchanging. Through inventive utilization of innovation, he made exchanging quicker and more straightforward and aided little financial backers break into circles that for ages had been overwhelmed by floor merchants. In the mid-1990s, Mr. Madoff was selected administrator of the NASDAQ, the primary electronic securities exchange. His firm turned into a foundation and worked from Manhattan's Lipstick Building, a milestone in the monetary capital of the United States. As his prosperity developed, Mr. Madoff turned out to be progressively groveled on and, by his plan, slippery, so nobody would identify the false activity that, sooner or later, he started running as an afterthought. Mr. Madoff dated his plan to 1992, while government specialists followed it starting to the 1980s. Different records proposed that it began much before. Mr. Madoff didn't publicize. Maybe then lassoing forthcoming financial backers, he dismissed many. He had observed that the less customers he acknowledged, the more attractive his administrations would show up. There was a fantasy that he made around him that everything was so exceptional, so novel, that it must be secret. Wiesel, whose Elie Wiesel Foundation for Humanity lost $15 million, set out in the open comments. Previous workers reviewed the battle-ready power Mr. Madoff applied over his office. Workspaces were to be kept perfectly spotless. The style, on his request, included dark and dim tones portrayed by one guest as frostily chilly present day. Simultaneously, Mr. Madoff looked to project genuineness, underlining the family-run nature of his business, which incorporated his children, his sibling, Peter B. Madoff, and different family members. Mr. Madoff embraced a consoling proverb: the proprietor's name is on the entryway. He guaranteed his financial backers yearly returns of around 12%, sufficiently sizable to be noteworthy yet unassuming enough to stay away from doubt. More than huge, the profits were consistent. Mr. Madoff turned out to be generally known as the Jewish T-Charge, a reference to his Jewish foundation, his numerous Jewish customers, and an old moniker for moderate government treasury securities. For quite a long time, Mr. Madoff repelled financial backers, writers and government controllers who scrutinized his outcomes. "It's a restrictive procedure," he said in 2001 to Aaron E. Arvedlin, at that point composing for Barron's magazine and later a Madoff biographer. "I can't go into it in incredible detail." By and large, numerous specialists concurred that the consistency of his profits in an unstable market ought to have induced more noteworthy suspicion. Other warnings incorporated the obsolete registering framework that Mr. Madoff utilized for his record-keeping and immovably wouldn't supplant. His exchanging proclamations, delivered on a typewriter lace printer in a time of laser machines, glanced somewhat fake looking back, in any event one financial backer noticed. In November 2005, Harry Markopoulos, a subordinates master and venture supervisor, submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission a notice about Mr. Madoff named the world's largest hedge fund as a fraud. The SEC explored Mr. Madoff's firm at any rate multiple times before his capture. Yet, the plan went on. In jail, during an examination by the Sex Controller General, Mr. Madoff said that he was amazed that controllers had not all the more completely confirmed the exchanging he announced. He said he realized that he would one day be uncovered. "As I occupied with my extortion, I understood what I was doing wasn't right, in reality criminal," Mr. Madoff said at the hour of his liable supplication. "At the point when I started the Ponzi conspire, I trusted it would end in no time and I would have the option to remove myself and my customers from the plan. Notwithstanding, this demonstrated troublesome, and eventually unthinkable, and as the years passed by, I understood that my capture and this day would definitely come. Achievement, abundance, ruin." Bernard Lawrence Madoff, one of three youngsters, was conceived April 29, 1938, in New York City. Point-by-point data about his family was not generally accessible. His dad, Ralph Madoff, composed on his marriage permit that his occupation was credit. A family colleague reviewed that he was maybe a stockbroker or a record delegate, Fortune magazine detailed. Both he and his better half, the previous Sylvia Muntner, seemed to have had charge and other legitimate issues including their funds. Bernard Madoff went to the University of Alabama prior to moving to Hofstra University on Long Island, where he got a 4-year college education in political theory in 1960. A year sooner, he wedded Ruth Alpern, his youth darling. He joined in yet didn't move on from Brooklyn Law School, having hurled himself entirely into his venture business. Book. Ruth Madoff hurt more by spouse's supposed disloyalty than his Ponzi plot. Other than his advancements in modernized exchanging, he created and promoted an idea known as installment for request stream, in which intermediaries are paid a penny or more for every offer for steering business to showcase creators like Mr. Madoff's firm. By the 1990s, the training had gotten normal and profoundly disputable. Pundits depicted the installments as payoffs. Individuals might want to apply pejorative-type terms, Mr. Madoff said at that point. I think individuals that utilization that sort of phrasing are troubled, they are losing business. The training, which isn't illicit, keeps on being far-reaching and aided Mr. Madoff make his fortune. Other than his penthouse loft in Manhattan, his resources remembered homes for the Long Island People Group of Montauk and in Palm Beach, Florida, yachts, and offers in personal luxury planes. He likewise gathered watches. He had in any event 2 wedding bands, the New York Times announced, so he could coordinate with the metal of the ring to the watch, gold or platinum, that he had chosen for wear. Notwithstanding his business advantages, Mr. Madoff worked with his better half, the multi-million Madoff Family Foundation, that offered cash to clinical, social, instructive and different causes. When he admitted his wrongdoing to his better half, she was said to have answered with an inquiry, "What's a Ponzi plot?" Ruth Madoff said freely that she and her significant other endeavored self-destruction by taking dosing pills on Christmas Eve in 2008, when he was under house capture. In the end, she said, she finished correspondence with her better half. Their child Mark Madoff draped himself in 2010, on the second commemoration of his dad's capture, in the midst of claims looking for recuperation of Madoff family resources for reimburse casualties of the misrepresentation. Before a prior self-destruction endeavor, his widow wrote in a book, Mark Madoff left a letter to his dad. It read to a limited extent, "Bernie, now you know how you have obliterated the existences of your children by your life of misdirection." In 2012, Peter Madoff, who had been boss consistence official at Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, was condemned to 10 years in jail in the wake of confessing to charges identified with the evasion of expenses and bogus filings to controllers. He kept up that he had not known about his siblings' Ponzi plot until in the blink of an eye before it was uncovered to people in general. He was delivered from home control in 2020. In 2014, Mr. Madoff's child Andrew passed on of mantle cell lymphoma. A total rundown of survivors was not promptly accessible. Andrew H. Madoff, child of indicted lender, bites the dust at 48. In the years since his capture, biographers have decided to uncover some fatal defect that Mr. Madoff had, some difficulty he had gone through, or some pathology that may be analyzed to clarify why he did what he did. The endeavors to completely comprehend his wrongdoing were uncertain. In email trades with Diana B. Enriquez, a correspondent who shrouded his defeat in the Times and later composed a book about him, he cast fault on unpleasant customers who, he said, had driven him into misfortunes that he was unable to withstand. Switching the standard depiction of his relationship with his financial backers, he guaranteed that it was he who had, absurdly, trusted them. At his condemning, the appointed authority portrayed the misrepresentation as exceptionally abhorrent, and described a scene in which Mr. Madoff guaranteed a lamenting widow that her cash was protected with him. "I'm grieved," the litigant said under the watchful eye of the court. He added, "I realize that doesn't help you. Thanks for watching. Bye now."
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Life is Often if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.